Hello Internet, welcome to Epic Chinese 5000, a channel where I tell you stories from the thousands of years of the fascinating Chinese history. I hope you will be entertained, or maybe even get something out of these stories to better your lives, whether they're real or fantastical. In this video, I'm going to tell you the stories of two Sun Tzus. Now, those of you who have a wide range of knowledge might think, isn't Sun Tzu the guy who wrote The Art of War? What do you mean by two Sun Tzus? Well, good question. Sun Tzu actually isn't the name of just one guy. Tzu is the ancient China's way of respectfully titling someone. It's kind of like our way of saying PhD, doctor, professor, sire, master, etc. These two Sun Tzus were grandpa and grandson, and they were both so smart and so influential that later generations would call them both Sun Tzu. Before I start though, here's a disclaimer. I'm not a professional historian, and all I want to do here in this channel is to tell you good stories from the ancient Chinese history. If you're still interested in the more detailed backgrounds of these stories, please go to my other channel, Epic Chronicles 5000. Okay, the first story is about how to control hundreds of women like you can control your fingers, and it's from Sun Wu, the grandpa Sun Tzu. Sun Wu was the one who actually wrote the 13 chapters of The Art of War. We don't know too much about his earlier lives, except that he was from the country of Qi. One day, his 5,000-word masterpiece was discovered by the king of the country Wu. The Wu king summoned him to court and asked, "I have read all 13 chapters of your work of how to win a war. Is it possible for you to demonstrate what you preached?" "Sure, your majesty," Sun Wu said. "Even..." The king paused, wanting to propose him a challenge. "With women?" he finished. "Sure, your majesty," Sun Wu said. So the king called up 180 concubines and appointed Sun Wu as their commander. These women walked up to the court. They were wearing soft, long palace dresses with their hair well done. Instantly, the scent of perfumes and the sounds of clinking jewelries filled the entire court. Sun Wu separated them into two teams, armed them with armors, helmets, and halberds. He then appointed two concubines of the highest status as team captains. "Ladies," Sun Wu commanded, "do you know where your heart is? Do you know where your back is? Do you know where your left hand is, and do you know where your right hand is?" "Yes," the girls giggled. "Good. You will turn towards the direction I command." So Sun Wu set up a head-chopping axe as punishment of disobedience, repeated his order 3 times, and re-emphasized the rules 5 times. By the way, that's where the idiom 三令五申 came from. The drum started. Sun Wu commanded, "Right." And the girls laughed out loud. Sun Wu stopped, turned to the king, and said, "Your Majesty, I apologize. When the rules are not clear, and the order is not well understood, it is the fault of the commander." So he turned back to his army of giggling palace girls, repeated his order 3 times, re-emphasized the rules 5 times, restarted the drum, and commanded, "Left." The girls laughed even harder than ever before. Clearly, they were greatly amused by this silly idea of turning them into an army. Sun Wu stopped, turned to the king, and said, "Your Majesty, when the rules are not clear and the order is not well understood, it is the fault of the commander. However, when the order is clearly understood yet not followed, it is the fault of the soldiers." He turned to the head-chopping axer and commanded that the 2 captains are to be executed. The king panicked. He stopped Sun Wu and half pleaded, "General, I now truly know your ability to command an army. These 2 women are my favorite. I could hardly taste any food without their company. So please don't kill them?" Sun Wu said, "Your Majesty, I was already appointed by you. When a general is out there commanding an army, the situation is at his full discretion. Even the king's orders may not all be obeyed." Sun Wu turned back, gave the order of execution. The 2 concubines finally realized that this was serious. They were shivering like fragile leaves in the harsh winter winds. Before they could beg the king and Sun Wu for mercy, Already, they were dragged to the axer. In the blink of an eye, their beautiful heads were off. Strands of scattered hair mixed with blood and was soon cleaned off from the floor. Sun Wu appointed another 2 women as new captains, restarted the drums, and commanded, "Right." This time, the only sound you could hear is that of the women stepping exactly in the direction of Sun Wu's command. Left, right, back, front, kneel, charge. It was absolute obedience. Sun Wu then turned to the king and reported, "Your Majesty, this army is now ready for your examination. You can now use it according to your will, even if it's to go through ice and fire." The king said tiredly, "General, you can go back to your chamber and rest. I don't really want to examine them." Sun Wu said, "Your Majesty, you related to my words, yet drew back when it's in reality." Since then, the king of Wu finally understood how powerful Sun Wu's philosophy was and went on to win many wars with Sun Wu as general. Now, I'd have to say that please don't attempt this method unless you have hundreds of concubines at your disposal. Remember, this happened thousands of years ago when life was a lot harsher for the powerless. Nowadays, if you want to lead with efficiency, just follow Sun Wu's spirit, which is to give orders clearly and to be a person of your word. Just don't go chop off anyone's head, okay? Okay, good. So, our second story is a simple strategy of how to guarantee winning at horse races. And it's from Sun Bin, the grandson Sun Ci. It is hard to talk about Sun Bin's life without mentioning his classmate/frenemy Pang Juan, but I'm going to save that for another video. By the way, these 2, according to some historical documents, had some very interesting stories. They're filled with battle of wits, political struggles, betrayal, and cruel and unusual punishments. If you're interested, please subscribe and stay tuned. So, Sun Bin had gone through some really tough times. At the lowest point in his life, he was rotting away in the prison of the country Wei. He had just got his feet chopped off, his face permanently tattooed with a mark of shame, and was literally rolling with some muddy pigs and eating their feces. Seriously. Anyway, in that hellhole, he managed to get in contact with his ancestral home country, Qi, and eventually was rescued by a general of Qi. This general brought him back and treated him nicely. Now, at that time, it was fashionable for Qi's elites to compete and bet in archery and horse racing. The king of Qi especially loved horse racing, probably because his horses always won. Well, one day, after another race, the king had won another time, and the general had again lost money over his slower horses. Sun Bin came to see the general. "Sir, I've been observing. There are 3 categories of horses according to their qualities, right? Top, medium, and bottom." "Yeah," the general said. "Even though the king always won," Sun Bin continued, "your horses were never too far behind in every category. In the next game, please bet heavily and follow my plan, and I will guarantee your victory." The general trusted him very much and did exactly what he said, especially the heavy betting part. He bet 1,000 pounds of gold. Before the race was about to start, Sun Bin told the general, "Sir, when the king plays his top horse, you play your bottom horse. When he plays his medium horse, you play your top. And when he plays his bottom horse, you play your medium." Ah. The general followed his advice to a T. First race, the general lost miserably. Second race, his top horse won. And final race, everyone was holding their breath. Could the king actually lose this time? The general's medium horse and the king's bottom horse approached the finishing line, and the medium horse edged out and claimed the victory for the general. The king, who was now 1,000 pounds of gold poorer, asked, "General, how did you win?" The general replied, "Your Majesty, it wasn't me. I still use the same horses as before. It was a guest of mine, Sun Bing, grandson of Sun Wuci, who gave me the winning strategy." So the king of Qi inquired Sun Bing about how to win wars. The king was very impressed. He then recognized Sun Bing as his advisor and teacher, which had never happened before in Qi to anyone who was footless, tattooed, and lived with pigs. Thank you very much for hanging out with me, and I hope you've enjoyed the stories. We will see you next time. Bye!